patiently.
احنا الشعب اللي تمشى بالحفاظ، عالشوك عجلي وعلى النار.
بن بولعيد واسمو مصطفى، علي لطوانت وبدي عمار. القصبة ما زالها واقفة وما زالوا عساس الدار، ما زالها سعلة السقيفة وما زالها حرمة الجار. أنا يا بلادي راني عارف، هما ما كانوش عارفين.
دهشوا نهار علي ما توقف، احنا عادتنا نموت واقفين. نموت على النيف والشرف، نموت على الوطن والدين. علمنا بلا ريح يرفرف، احنا هما الجزائريين. أنا يا بلادي على بالي، هما ما كانوش فاهمين.
حبوا يدي والبلاد ديالي، حسبونا ماناش قادرين. فكتهم حسيبة بنبوع للجميلة ونسى الأخرين. من حقك يا الجزائر تولولي ولدي نساو رجال حرين. أنا يا بلادي سمحيلي، ما قدرتش نذكرهم كاملين.
واش نذكر واش نخلي، شهداء رواحهم طاهرين. مازالهم في قلبي وفي بالي، ربي يرحمهم أجمعين. والقصبة مازالها ديالي، وسط الدار والعرس واقفين.
معليش يا القصبة وريلهم،
قرصان رياس وساطيل. على عروج وخير الدين احكي لهم،
وفهم الناس اللي جاهلين.
باللي الجزائر ماهيش ليهم، ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس. كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين.
باللي الجزائر ماشي ديالهم، ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس. كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends of Jazair Hope, good evening and welcome to today's live. I thank you very much for joining us to this talk with Professor Ilan Pape, renewed historian and author of many books, particularly on the Palestine and Israel conflict. Thank you very much, Ilan, for joining me for the third time, actually.
Yes, it's a great pleasure to be again on your show and to hear once more the beautiful song about Jazair and its struggle for liberation and freedom.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, today we will be talking about geopolitics, focusing on Palestine issue, which is very important to all of us and to the whole world. And the question we will be asking is Trump a good news for the world? So to address this question, I have prepared a few questions that we will go through. So we will be speaking about the relationship between Israel and the United States during the second term of Trump. We will be talking about Israel internal policies, also about the regional power shifts after the ceasefire in Gaza and the collapse of Bashar Assad in Syria. And then we will move to USA foreign policy under Trump's leadership. And we will also discuss the global, the internal policies in the USA, where particularly the relationship of Trump with the deep state. So we'll start directly with the first point, Ilan, if you allow me. And the question stems from the fact that in his first term, Trump has supported Israel. He has recognized that Al-Quds is the capital of Israel. He moved the embassy actually there. And a lot of people are asking if Trump will continue supporting Israel unconditionally, or this time around this support is just political and might change depending on how things evolve.
Yes, it's a very good question. We can see that at the beginning of Trump's second term in office, he continued the same line as in his first term in office, namely unconditional support for Israeli annexationist policies in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, definitely no condemnation of the Israeli policies in the Gaza Strip, and more or less backing most of the Israeli actions on the ground. There was one difference, I think, the fact that there is some sort of a prisoner exchange deal is not because Benjamin Netanyahu wanted it, but because Trump pressured him to do this. And that gives us an indication that although ideologically Trump would, and his advisors and the main people in his administration would have no problem with the annexation of the West Bank, or even, unfortunately, a continued war in Gaza. On the other hand, there is another side to Trump 2.0, let's call it, Trump in second term. It's very clear that he wants to be remembered as someone who doesn't start wars, as he puts it himself, but one who ends war. And I think he will find out two things very soon. One is that the Israeli right wing, which is very dominant now in Israeli politics, would want to continue the war and not to end it. And that would see how they clash about that. And secondly, and maybe even more importantly, I think that Trump really believes that if he succeeds in getting Israel and Saudi Arabia to sign a peace treaty, then he might even get the Nobel Peace Prize. It seems to me to be a very important objective for President Trump. Now, of course, it's again, I don't think he fully understands the composition of politics in Israel. This is impossible. Not to mention that his hallucinating ideas of moving almost 2 million Palestinians out of Gaza have no ground in reality. And as much as he can pressure Jordan and Egypt, they will never accept this program. I can predict it. So I think we should not totally judge the continuation of the Trump administration's relationship with Israel only on the basis of what we have seen up to now. Up to now, it looks like the same like the last term, but there are real challenges there for Trump and his administration that might change the picture later on, maybe in a later stage of his term in office.
Great. You just said that we can judge his intentions and or his policies just until now, but does that mean that depending on his trader kind of mindset and facing a lot of resistance, he might change completely and pressure Israel further for different kind of approach to the problem?
Totally change, I'm not sure, but you're absolutely right. There is a businessman inside him, and a businessman would have to decide that Israel is an asset, not a burden, not a problem. And I don't think he even himself understands, and neither does his friend Elon Musk, how much money America would have to invest inside Israel if it wants to support Israel unconditionally. I think he will find out within a year. That's my prediction. Within a year, he would find out that Israel costs much more money to the American taxpayer than he thought. And then it would be very interesting. I don't want to predict, but it would be very interesting to see how the businessman in him, who wants to put America first, would deal with such a huge expenditure in order to sustain a policy that not only is against the Palestinians. Unfortunately, I don't think he cares about the Palestinians, unlike Obama, for instance, but which can really undermine the stability of the Arab world and the Middle East as a whole. I lost you that thing.
Okay. The next very interesting question, or at least what I have seen from my readings through this, is about Israel internal politics. How Trump re-election has been received?
Yeah.
Was it like good news internally, or did it trigger more divide within the Israeli society?
Well, I think for the people who are now in power in Israel, they saw the election of Trump as almost a God's sent development. They were very happy about it. They thought that now have an American president who would fully support their ideas of annexing the West Bank, of trying to get rid of all the people of Gaza, and even expand Israeli borders into Western Syria and South Lebanon. So I think the right wing in Israel and the Netanyahu alliance is very happy with the election of Trump. However, Netanyahu's popularity in Israel is in great decline because of the hostages crisis, because of the economic crisis, because of the sense that the military still cannot secure the return of hundreds of thousands of Israelis either to the south or to the north, to their original homes. We have to remember there are quite a large number of internal Jewish refugees now inside Israel. Of course, there are 5-star refugees, but nonetheless, these are people who were uprooted from their homes. And I think that's why the other opposition parties were not totally enthusiastic about Trump, because I think they identified with former President Biden's policy much more than with the Trump policy, which was, by the way, not much better as far as the Palestinians were concerned, as we know, but it was a different style. So I think to answer differently your question, Fethi, I would say the internal conflict in Israel is real. There's really a conflict, a very serious conflict. Last time I was on your show, we talked about it. This is something that can bring down Israel. It's so powerful. Trump is not that important for that internal conflict. It has its own causes, its own reasons. It is the inability of the more secular liberal Jews to find a common ground with the more religious, fanatic, theocratic Jews. They cannot find a joint way of creating one common society. And Trump, in that respect, is not as relevant as the fundamental problem of the solidity of the Jewish society inside Israel.
Yeah, I see that. Ilana, I would like we move now to the regional impact, or how the politics in the region will look like post-Trump election, and particularly also after the ceasefire, the collapse of Syria, if we can put it that way. We feel that things are evolving to a situation that is a bit difficult to read, particularly between Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Turkey. What is your insight on that, Ilan?
Yes, I think you're right. It's a very volatile moment in the history, especially of the Mashriq, but even beyond the Mashriq. You're absolutely right to mention Iran and Saudi Arabia also in this context. I think that what we see here is a process that we have to evaluate it in a wider context. I think it would be wrong just to look at the last 2 years or the last year, or just look ahead into the next year. I suggest looking at it as a longer process, and maybe that can give us some clarity of what goes on. I think what we see is the collapse of some of the political structures that were built by the colonial powers after the First World War, by Britain and France. You know, the infamous Sykes-Picot Agreement. And Syria disintegrated in many ways. Lebanon is in a very volatile moment. And although the kind of more royal houses, whether it's the Saudi or the Hashemite house in Jordan, seem to be a bit more stable, they're also under a great pressure of legitimacy and stability. And I think that we are going to see this process continuing, because the political structure was not natural to the area. And there are only two options here, really. Either to build a better political structure that reflects the people's identities, group identities, collective identities, their aspirations, rebuilding the relationship, which were quite good, by the way, before Western imperialism invaded the area, or letting everyone from the outside, like the Turks, the Iranians, the Americans, the Israelis, to intervene, and then this disintegration can go on for too long and creates havoc and violence and so on. But I really do think that these are monumental processes of change that will take time to mature, but they are happening. I think they are happening. And therefore, I would not look, for example, I'll give you one good example. We don't know enough about Mr. al-Julani, who took over Bashar Assad's rule. But we do know that both the Turks, the Israelis, the Americans helped him. We know that he now looks for a good relationship also with Iran and Saudi Arabia. So it's a new game. It's a new game. Someone sits in Damascus and says to himself, I can be in good relationship with everyone. Israel, Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia. Of course, this is impossible. This is ignoring the Palestinian issue. And the Palestinian issue is at the heart of the Mashriq. You cannot take it out. You can decide to ignore it, but it will come to bite you. And therefore, I think that whatever he's planning, if it is not including also an approach towards Palestine and the whole issue of the political structure of the Mashriq, what we will see is a long period of instability that will eventually also affect Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Lebanon. And of course, Israel has its own disintegrating processes. So I do think that we are in a very dangerous moment, because when regimes collapse or when a political order that we are familiar with is falling apart, it's always a very violent moment. There's no way of escaping it. But we have to shorten that moment and build something else. The end of the French ruthless occupation and colonization of Algeria was also not a peaceful moment. This is history. This has nothing to do. There's nothing. It's decolonization is not a journey in the park.
Yes.
Decolonization is a very necessary step, but we have to be very careful because it can go very violent and very viral. I think we are in decolonization processes, both in Israel, but also around Israel in many parts of the Mashriq.
Ilan, in more particular lenses, do you see Iran and Saudi Arabia getting closer because of their historical rivalries with Turkey, because of the ambition of Turkey to take leadership in the region, and which can result in a significant blockage to the Abraham Accord or their disintegration if, for example, Egypt gets into the play and so on. So the question, do you see Saudi Arabia and Iran getting closer?
Yeah, I think the key is in Riyadh, not in Tehran. The key is in Riyadh. And I think in Riyadh, Mohammed bin Salman and the people around him are playing now on both sides, because I don't think they made a final strategic decision. On the one hand, they send very clear messages to Trump, and especially to his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who has very good personal relationship with the Saudi dynasty, that they are still interested in normalization with Israel, provided people would talk seriously about a two-state solution in Israel and Palestine. On the other hand, they are also warming up the relationship with Iran. So in a way, now they, I think, are waiting to see, which I think we didn't talk about when we talked about Trump. Trump, unlike the previous administration, is able to come to Tehran. He did it with North Korea, so he can do it with Tehran. He can come to Tehran and say, let's have a business deal with your nuclear weapon and so on. Now, if the tension between America and Iran are going to weaken, then I think without intentional, not because of Trump's intentional, unintentionally, Trump would build a more realistic alliances between the regional powers in the Middle East, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and so on, which I think is necessary if we want once and for all to move towards a just solution for the Palestine question. It's not that I think that Tehran or Riyadh are particularly interested in the plight of the Palestinians, but I do think that they understand that Palestine is the last colonialist project in the Middle East. Algeria was before that the last one. Now it's Palestine, and you have to solve it. You cannot say it can continue and somehow we will manage it. And I think it affects even Iran and Saudi Arabia, even if it's more far away. Of course, it will help if Iran would have its own, reforms and a better record of human rights and civil rights. Iran could play a much more positive role with more changes within, but it's their business. And but I do think Trump may, by pacifying relationship with Iran and preventing Israel from attacking Iran, because Israel cannot attack Iran without the United States. Then it would be very interesting to follow these developments in terms of building a different kind of pan-Arab alliance that so far has not been possible because of the Abraham Accords and the previous American policies of intervention in the region.
Ilan, you triggered the question that was not in my plan. It's a short one, but it's great to have your views. After more than a year from 7th October, do you see the Palestinian cause gaining momentum or losing momentum after all those developments?
Well, I think it's gaining momentum, and I'll explain what I mean by that. I think there is, as terrible as it sounds, whatever happened on the 7th of October and after the 7th of October created a global movement of solidarity with the Palestinians on an unprecedented level. We didn't have such a huge support before. I mean, yes, there was quite a lot of support on the left in the 1970s, but this time the support is encompassing. And it's not reflected, unfortunately, by the policies of the governments, by the political elites, not by the cultural and academic elites, but it's a very wide movement of support. And that gives momentum. And I think that what is missing for me, although I understand why it's missing, but I still have to comment what's missing, for that energy to be used in an effective way to change the reality on the ground, you need a proper Palestinian liberation movement. We don't have now a proper Palestinian liberation movement. We have a fragmented, disunited Palestinian movement. I know that there are very noble and I would say even hopeful signs that the younger generation of Palestinians are trying to either revise the PLO or build a new organization. This would be amazing, because if they do that, they can take this momentum. Momentum by itself is not that important. What you do with the momentum is important.
Yes.
Because there's also another momentum, and that's the momentum of popular fascist politics. Trump in America, Orban in Hungary, the far right in Italy. You have Modi in India. You also have that momentum. But in order to counter that momentum, you need, I think Palestine is a very important issue for the counter forces against fascism, populism, and neo-capitalism that are ruining especially the global south, but also a lot of sections of the society in the global north.
Absolutely. Ilan, I would like to stress the point that you made now by referring to Algeria's effort year before 7th October, when there was the Arab Summit in Algeria, where Algeria has gathered all Palestinian factions, and the purpose was to unify them. So I want to stress that for the people who are following us. Indeed, so without one front, this momentum can lose steam, at least.
Absolutely. I think that the Algerian model also historically was revered by the Palestinian revolution and liberation in the 60s and the 70s. But unfortunately, there are developments, as we know, within the political arena of the Palestinians that began with the destruction of the PLO in Beirut in 1982, and then the terrible idea of the Oslo Accord in 1993 that divided the Palestinians and so on. But yes, it's possible. This is man-made crisis, and man-made solutions can work for it. I mean, it's not beyond the possibilities of people to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely, and another point is that those efforts of reunifying the fact that Palestinian factions was undermined to a lot of extent by, I would say, as an Algerian from our lecture to the situation by UAE, which get very close to Israel, but maybe one of the possible developments after all what has happened is that because of the fear of Trump's actions, maybe the Arab countries will try to gather around something different. Matter of fact, there is a summit planned for Egypt, and
exactly.
we all hope that will reunify the Arab countries group.
Inshallah. Yes, I do think so. I think it's important and possible.
Okay. Moving a little bit away from the region, and before we talk about the U.S. Internal policies, I would like to have your insight about more global developments, particularly with regards to Russia, which there is an impression, at least, that communication between Putin and Trump is much better than with the previous leadership in the US. But in the same time, the relationship with China has been always planned to be difficult under Trump. My question is, do you see Trump as someone who is, again, with his trader mindset, as someone who will accept the group of BRICS, multipolarity? What will be his relationship with the Europe? So if you can give us your insights about Trump's global foreign policies.
I think there's a difference between the way Trump deals with the Ukrainian issue and Putin and the trade war that he started against China. I think I don't think he has any chance of solving the problem in Palestine, but I do believe that he can reach an understanding with Putin and put pressure on Zelensky in Ukraine. And probably what we will see is a trade-off between annexation of some of the Russian areas that were part of the Ukraine in return for some sort of a closer alliance between the Ukraine and NATO. I think that's the kind of thing Trump is able, as a businessman, to bring about, because people are very exhausted in Central Europe by the war. So he comes in a very good historical timing to propose it. 2 years ago, nobody would have listened to him, but I think this time, after 3 years almost of a war, it will work. China is a different story, because I think China, it's about business. It's about a trade war of tariffs. But again, I think that the main problem for Trump, to my mind, I'm not an economist, but the little I know about economy, is that, and that is something also very important economists are saying, the problem with his policy of tariffs, that is putting taxes on everything that is brought from China to America, is not China. The problem would be for the American consumer, because what Americans probably don't understand, that when you do a tariff war, the people who would pay a higher price are the Americans, not the Chinese. And this would affect the standard of living. I think there's something typical to populist leaders like Trump. They may be good businessmen in construction, but I don't think they know how to run a state. Definitely not the economy of a world power. And I think this economic crisis would lead to a far less involvement of the United States in world affairs in general, and in the Middle East in particular. And one has to be honest, for us in the Middle East, if America is less involved, it's good news, it's not bad news. Because if we look at the record of American involvement, very rarely you can point to a positive contribution to peace, to prosperity, to stability. You can see all the time that the intervention is usually against the will of the people, not to mention in the case of the invasion of Iraq, it cost the lives of 1 million Iraqis. In the case of Palestine, it was always against the Palestinians. They never supported progressive forces in the Arab world. They fought against them as if they were the enemies of the United States, although people in the Arab world did not care about the United States, but the United States treated them as enemies. So I think, this kind of economic war that he started, not only, as you know, not only with China, with Canada, with Mexico, with the EU as well, would have a very negative effect on American economy. And American economy can bring him down and maybe bring to the fore finally more reasonable political forces in Washington, which we all need. They are still important, but we need different kind of politicians in America that have some moral values, that understand the American responsibility for many of the problems that we have in the world, especially in the Arab world, especially Palestine. All this can still happen. I'm quite hopeful about it.
In short, Ilan, do you see Trump caring about a multipolar world or leadership on the world? Does he care about this? Does he care seeing BRICS competing with the US?
No, I don't think he cares that much. In fact, his issue is not so much with BRICS. His issue is with those he calls the allies of America. He thinks America puts too much money in NATO. It puts too much. It gave the EU deals which are too generous. I think he's much less alien to BRICS than he is to his allies. If you look at what Canada and Mexico are not part of BRICS. They were part of the American sphere of trade and so on. On the other hand, I mean, this is a guy who I wouldn't take everything that he says as sacred and carved in stone. He changes his mind sometimes in the same sentence. What is worrying is not only him. What is worrying is the people around him, Christian Zionists, who would like to push policies which are racist and fanatic in America and outside of America. People like Elon Musk, he's a fascist by his own admission, and can have a lot of influence on our communications and so on. It's a sad. I tell you what the sad news about it all is, Fethi. The world at large faces some global challenges: global warming, poverty, immigration. This is not a problem of one country. It's not also a problem of one continent. This is a global problem. The only way of dealing with global issues is global cooperation. But when America destroys international law, does not recognize international law, does not respect international law, and that's the most negative side of Trump in his second term in office, is totally disregard and actually a direct attack on international law. This would affect not just Palestine. This will affect the ability of the world to deal with issues that you can only deal in global cooperation.
Ilan, I reached my last question about the internal policies in the US. You know about the dismantle of the USAID organization, which is the strongest soft power arm of the US around the world. And my question in relation to that is, how do you see the relationship Trump with the decision makers in the US, the former decision makers, what we call between quote unquote deep state? How do you see that evolving after his election?
Yeah, well, it was very worrying to see how all the leaders of the mega firms that are running the internet, all the communication, whether it's Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, all of these people are coming very close to Trump and trying to get kind of a deals with him. These are the people who control our internet highway, our ability to communicate, to exchange ideas. They can affect our freedom of expression, our freedom of ideas. So that is very worrying on that side. On the other hand, it's very interesting what you say about USAID, the soft power, which I totally agree with you, by the way. But you know, the problem with a soft power like USAID is that it was so powerful in a way that it did not allow any alternative agencies to work instead of it. So if you close tomorrow USAID, there are many parts in the world that would suffer because there's no alternative. And I think this is where I would look towards BRICS. I would look towards the Arab world. I would look towards the oil producing countries in Latin America. I would look towards Malaysia and Indonesia. And I would say to the global south, it's not enough to challenge both the American deep state or the soft power that America has. It's also important to suggest an alternative, a different kind. I would even reorganize the United Nations. I'm serious about it. I think this idea that on the one hand you have an organization that, of course, tries to be just and represent many concerns of the global communities. On the other hand, America pays such a large budget of this organization. So we need to find a way to get out of these contradictions. So the resources should come also from other countries, from other sections of societies, in order that our international organizations would be transparent, would not be connected to the deep state, would not try to use soft power and present it as humanitarian aid. This is something we should aspire to, and I think as a global community we can do this. But it's not important. It's not enough to challenge the powers that be. There needs to be a very good idea of what would replace it. This is true on a micro level as it is true on the macro level. The United Nations, as one of your viewers says rightly, became an empty shell. That is true. But that doesn't mean that the world doesn't need a United Nations. It doesn't need the kind of United Nations we have. I'm not sure even the ICG and the ICC are enough. I think we need to rebuild the organization. If you allow me just one more sentence, I think I'm an historian and I always look at the origins. What we call today international law, what we call today the United Nations, what we call today international organization, international concern, this was built by the West in 1946, when most of the global south was still colonized. The ideas of what is universal and what is international was done without any consultation with people in the global south, without the colonized world. Algeria was still colonized when the world decided what is universal, what is international. Palestine's future was decided without anyone in the colonized world be able to say what does it think about the idea of creating a Jewish state instead of Palestine. So all these things have to be taken into account, because we have to understand the foundation of the structure that we suffer from, but also be able to offer an alternative structure. Otherwise, the old structure will continue or even be weakened or be an empty shell, as one of your viewers rightly says. But that is even worse than having it doing bad things if nothing comes instead of it.
Absolutely. Just to stress this point, another project of Algeria was to reorganize the United Nations, as you said. But I completely agree with you. Reorganizing the United Nations does not mean that it is not important. Before we take a couple of questions, I have seen a couple that are interesting. Ilan, my last question is, in 2 words, is the world better during Trump era, or at least in perspective? Maybe we cannot reply to this question without any referring to referral, but are we in front of an administration that is better than Obama's administration and Biden administration?
No. I think what we are in, Fathi, is that we're at the end of a very bad period in global history. This is not we are not in a good world. We are in a world that too many people don't have enough to eat. Too many people don't have where to live. Too many people suffer from oppression. too many people are suffering from poverty, and this is. But I think this is the end of that period, where populist leaders like Trump are having a field day. No, I think the world is not in a better place, but it is towards the end of the bad period, because there will be a backlash, and I believe in human beings, and I think human beings would find a way, they have done it before in history. After such bad periods, people lick their wounds and move forward with better ideas of what is politics, what is humane, what is moral, and what people need really in order to have better life in as many places in the world as possible.
This is what I meant, Ilan. I meant that maybe the pain has reached such high levels that there is no outcome than looking for a solution.
Absolutely. You know, it's like I'm saying to the Palestinians, and I'm very honest, I'm very afraid of what's going to happen next year and the year after. I'm not going to say things are going to get better immediately. No. But I do think that this is the end of the bad period. I cannot say when it will end, but I do feel that this, especially the brutality like that Israel is showing, is because it's the end of that project and not because it's the beginning of a new terrible period. But rather, we are, as you said, it's an extreme moment that would have to explode eventually, and hopefully would open the way for a different kind of reality.
Absolutely. I have seen a couple of good questions.
Okay.
One of them has been discussed among analysts. It's this one: if the U.S. economic struggles reduce its ability to provide financial and military aid at current levels, how might this impact Israel's approach to the conflict? I have seen certain analysts saying that maybe Trump is supporting Israel on the short term. He will give them all what they want on the short term, and he will tell them, we don't want to get involved anymore into this, to simplify the question.
No, but I think it's a very good question, and I think you're also right, Fatri. I think that before he ends his term in office, Trump, as we know, he wants to run for a third term. We'll see. He wants to change the American Constitution, run for a third term. But before he ends this term in office, he will find out that the money that Israel needs in order to continue its policies is beyond what he's willing to give them, to put it simply. So answering the question we were asked, I would say that if the American economy struggles, and I do think it will struggle, then it will affect fundamentally Israel. In fact, I think it would be one of the reasons, not the only one, but one of the reasons that would lead to a situation where there is a chance of building a different kind of political reality on the ground. But again, I come back to my point. This does not only depend on America and the internal policies inside Israel, it also depends on the Palestinians' ability to be there with a clear vision of what they want to see in Palestine, what do they suggest to the 7 or 8 million Jewish people who live there now. All these questions have to be dealt with now, although I know how difficult it is when your own people are under the danger of ethnic cleansing, genocide, and oppression. But nonetheless, you cannot give up on strategy, even in the most difficult time.
Thank you very much, Ilan. Actually, the other question, we already addressed it. So I would like to let you say the last word, just in perspective of how a solution could look like. We have seen Netanyahu saying that we will never accept a Palestinian state, and we have seen Saudi Arabia saying that any normalization with Israel should be after a Palestinian state. So how do you see things evolving? The question of two states, one state, or for that matter, a complete confrontation because of this disagreement?
Well, I think that the two-state solution is dead. I don't think it's a realistic solution. I don't think it will ever happen. What I do think we should work towards, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think we should work towards, is a one state for all, a democratic state, with equality for everyone, with the return of the Palestinian refugees. We need to build it on restorative justice. But I do believe that this is not just about Palestine. This is about the Mashriq as a whole. I think that eventually I do think that we can take from the past the good things. There were also some bad things in the pre-colonialist period, but we have to do the good things and build a new future. And you know, I'm thinking about Algeria in this context as well, and I'm thinking about the Maghreb, the North Africa, all together on this. We have a large number of Jews who came from Arab countries, especially from North Africa, including in Israel, I'm saying. There's a large group of Algerian Jews. They were in many ways forced to come over. They didn't want to come over, but they were seduced that this is something that will make their life better. It didn't make their life better. But I think the Arab Jews, the Jews who came from Arab countries, from North African countries, are part of the Arab world. And I hope that they don't see it yet like this, but I hope one day they will understand that the future of anyone who lives in what used to be historical Palestine is to accept that we are part of the Arab world, part of its problems and part of its solutions. And the whole idea that you can create a European Jewish state in the midst of the Arab world, in the midst of the Muslim world, is not working. The only way it's working is by force. I do hope that this can be changed without violence by the regional powers, by the international community. It can be done also without violence. But when this is not work, violence erupts, as we have seen. But we should hope that this can be done in the best way. And it would be, to my mind, it would be a win-win situation for people who live now, not just in Palestine, but in the Arab world as a whole, that also needs to see some better days, not just Palestine. Yeah.
Well, Ilan, thank you very much. As usual, it was really a pleasure to have this talk with you. Very insightful. I think a lot of people will comment on it and will give us their views on this. I will myself convert it into an article that I will publish on my website. If you allow me to say a couple of words in French, Ilan, for our followers. Donc, mesdames et messieurs, pour ceux qui ne maîtrisent pas l'anglais, normalement, après quelques heures ou au plus tard, après 24 heures, il va y avoir, YouTube va mettre à disposition les sous-titres en français ou en arabe. Donc, vous pouvez revoir l'émission avec les sous-titres. Ilan, thank you very much. I wish you all the best on all what you endeavor, and I hope to have you sometime soon on another topics. Have a good evening.
So. Thank you very much. Looking forward. Thank you so much.
Ladies, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you also for being with us. Thank you for your comments. And again, in French, notre live prochain va être sur le même sujet. The world will be a better place. Est-ce que le monde va être un meilleur endroit, mais d'un point de vue complètement économique? Ilan, I was saying that my next live will be with an economist, and this topic will be exactly the same, but will be from an economic point of view. Will be a better place.
Looking forward.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Ilan.
Bye. Bye. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
حبك حكاية يا للناس، انت رواية كلك إحساس. حبك حكاية يا للناس، انتي رواية كلك إحساس. انتي رواية حبك حكاية. انتي رواية حبك حكاية. مدة وسنين كلك حنين، أنا وياك عشناها الاثنين. مدة وسنين كلك حنين، أنا وياك عشناها الاثنين. انتي رواية حبك حكاية. انتي رواية حبك حكاية. انتي رواية حبك حكاية. انتي رواية حبك حكاية. انتي القمر في ليلة سمر، كيفاش ننساك ابن البشر. انتي القمر في ليلة سمر، كيفاش ننساك يا ابن البشر. انتي رواية